a joint deep down in my heart. I'm waking up with your love from the start. I'm chasing the rainbow through the rain. I know it's gonna be a beautiful.
What's it like when it seems as if your whole world is being uprooted? What do? Well, today's guest is going to talk to that very thing. And I think that you're going to find along the way the hurt and the abandonment and the different things that we feel when life changes. I think you're going to also see a lot of hope and God in it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee, conversations of friends of faith to encourage and equip. I'm Kim Crabill, always delighted to be invited into your home to share with you some of the most amazing people that I find along life's path. Today is such a person. Her name is Dr. Cheryl Duvall, and she has such an incredible, interesting story, one with highs and lows, just like Ecclesiastes tells us. Some of the events that you will hear about will be delightful. Others will be those that will maybe help you remember some of the times in your life where you felt a little abandoned, that you felt like you just didn't understand what was going on, and you had to dig deep inside yourself to keep going. And that's the beautiful story that we're going to tell today as I bring on our very special guest today, Dr. Cheryl Duvall. Thank you so much, Cheryl, is it okay if I call you Cheryl?
Please do. Please do.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've gotten to know you since I've moved from Baltimore into the Lake Oconee area, and it's been delightful getting to know you. So I wanted to share your wonderful book, Africa in My Soul, with everyone. But before we begin all that, Cheryl, just tell us, what does the PhD stand for? What does that mean?
Well, it's I have a doctorate in organizational psychology, and organizational psychology doesn't mean I'm organized. It means I work with organizations, and I go into an organization and I work mainly with the management group, and we work with the different systems in the organization, and we end up trying to see how they can become more effective and efficient. So that's what an organizational psychologist does. And I decided when my children, I have two boys, and when they got up into the preteen years, I decided that I couldn't just stay at home as a housewife, although I loved being a mom. Just stay-at-home mom. I decided I wanted to start working part-time, so I started working, and that's how I went back to school and got my PhD on a part-time basis, and started working.
Wow! Now, why that? Why was that your calling, do you think?
Well, I love people. And I love working with people. And my husband was in business, and I loved his aspect of working with businesses. So it was just my two loves, my two interests. Oh. And so put the two together, and
there you go.
There you go. It just spoke my interests.
I understand that you're also quite the hiker.
Yes, I am. I'm training now, hopefully training, if nothing else doesn't happen, to climb Kilimanjaro in spring or summer. So I'm in training now for that. At my age, that's quite a feet.
that is quite a feat that's quite amazing. That good for you. Does that mean you run as well, or do you run?
Well, not as much running as hiking and walking. And there's a famous saying on the mountain. It's pole pole. That means slowly, slowly. They want you to walk slowly up the mountain to acclimatize as you're going up. So it's not a speed up the mountain. It's careful walking.
Right. How long does it take to do that? How long does it take to get to the top of the mountain?
It depends on the route you're taking, and the route I'm taking is going to take about 10 days.
Wow.
Yeah, 10
Yay.
days.
Good for you. That's exciting. Now, see, I love challenges like that. I don't think that challenge is one that I could ever meet, but who knows? Who knows? Well, Cheryl, you have quite the story. I love your book, Africa in My Soul. I was amazed reading it. A childhood interrupted. And let's talk about that. And I guess it started when you were around 8 years old. Your parents were called into missionary work, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. They were called into missionary work. They, quote, got the calling, and they went into New York City to train to be missionaries. And so we lived in New York at the training center there for about 6 months. And then we came back to do our deputation work, which is when you get your support up from all the churches, and got our barrels full. Back then we had barrels that we got ready for our first furlough, our first term, which was 4 years. So you were over there for 4 years. And then you come back for a year, and then you go back for 4 years and come home for a year of furlough. And that's the way it started out.
And when they told you that, I mean, that's a pretty delicate age for any type of change. I mean, from one school to another school, that a change like that is hard. How did you react initially?
Well, my parents called my older sister and I into the bedroom one night and told us. I was about 9 at the time when they told us, and they told us that we would be moving to Africa, and that we would be there for 4 years, and I was in quite a state of a shock. My only concept of Africa was Tarzan, and I used to watch that every Saturday morning, and you know what Tarzan was like, and that was my only concept of where we would be going and what it would be like. So I was quite in a state of shock. And at the same time, they told my sister she would not be going. She was 15 at the time, and that she would not be going because there wasn't a high school over there. So it was quite a shock to her that she would be staying behind and living with a church family. And that was quite a shock. And of course I cried and she cried, but we lived with it throughout the year, and
so then you go, and then you make your trip to Africa, and things definitely didn't play out the way you expected, did they? I mean, you found yourself alone. Tell us about.
Yeah. The most missionary kids go over there at a young age, or are even born over there, and so they grow up at boarding school from from a young age, and boarding school just becomes a way of life, and they're used to it. They just acclimate to it, and so homesickness is not a real issue, except maybe in first grade when they get used to it. I was 10 when I first went to boarding school, and we arrived in Africa, and just a short time later, I was sent off to boarding school. And I did not adjust well at all. It was my first time away from mom and dad, and I had never been away from home, and it was very, very hard for me to adjust. And I cried a lot. The food was different. Although they tried to, make it the same, we had different types of food. It tasted different. And the worst part of it was the bathroom situation. We had open showers, and I was an extremely modest child, and it was just very difficult for me. And we had 4 children to a room, 4 girls to a room, and we had bunk beds, army cots, and that was difficult for me to get used to. And so I just didn't adjust very well, and it took me quite some time to get used to it. And
So Cheryl, you're saying that, so you go to a new country,
mhm,
you're placed in boarding school
mhm,
for 9 months.
yes. Mhm,
So you're left virtually alone
mhm,
with strangers
yes.
who didn't look like you, who didn't react to things like you. The living situation was not like you. Nothing was the same. And you're 10 years old. How did you, and I think about that, and I try to relate that to someone in our viewing audience. And it's really hard because we know change from going from one school to another, from one county to another, from one state to the other. We even know going from one country to another. But that sense of abandonment you must have felt, whether it was true or not, that's what it would, I think, would seem like. It's hard to speak to that on a generic level because this is such a different type story. However, I wanted it told because you were able to endure this. And I think that gives all of us hope in the situation that we find ourselves in. I don't think, and I'm not one to ever minimize certain situations or cause others to be extreme. I think whatever you're dealing with, and that's your heart, and that's, there's no size to burdens or hurts or pains. But I do think that some of the more extreme ones help others be able to see that you can get through things. And that's where I wanted to land in this, is like, how did you, as a young girl, what went through your mind? How did you process that? Were you very fearful, I would think, very intimidated? Tell us, go if you don't mind. And I thank you so much for this interview. I know it's not easy, but take us back to those days, and the days had to be long at times, and how did you process that? What did you say to yourself as such a young girl that helped you get to the nighttime? And then I would assume it would even be you're covered in darkness, and I'm sure that brings in a whole different type of trepidation. So what were some principles? What did you think? What did you say to yourself? How did you get through that?
Well, I thought not having God call me, and just my parents, was kind of a thing that used to cross my mind as a child. I felt isolated from God. He didn't call me, he called my parents. And I used to try and detach myself from those feelings because I was angry at God. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be angry at God. I knew that was a no-no. And so I used to go down to the tennis courts, and to try to get rid of the feelings I didn't understand, I would just spin like all little girls used to spin, go around spinning. And I would spin until I just literally fell and couldn't feel anything anymore. The hot sun, it was so hot on the tennis courts, the heat rising up, the sun coming down, and I would spin until I just fell flat. And the tennis courts, because no one was down there during the hot part of the day. And that was one way I would just lose all sense of feeling and thinking. I could go away. That was my term for it, go away. I would go away and not be able to feel the guilt that I felt about being angry toward God. But that was when my anger toward God started. And just later in life could I put a term that I was really angry toward God for letting this happen to me, for letting my parents give me up to do something that I didn't understand, for giving me up, first of all, but then for doing something and sending me off to a school I didn't understand, and for abandoning me. Yeah. And that was a way that I dealt with it. Now, later on in life, I dealt with it through drinking and had a hard time with that throughout my life. And had to get rid of that through many years of suffering and finally getting rid of that problem. But I still had my bad ways developed in early childhood, developed bad ways of trying to get rid of these feelings that I had about anger toward my parents and anger toward God. And never really being able to understand why God let this happen to me, bottom line.
Absolutely. Has that ever been reconciled?
With my parents?
Or with God?
Oh, yes. Yes, it has. And I still work on it. I still work on it, but just in the B2B have I come to know really the love that God has for me and the joy that gives, and just incredible. But I'm a work in progress. You know, I'm just growing and changing on an everyday basis. But yes, I have reconciled the drinking and the relationship with God. And
yeah, I thought so. I just wanted, for our audience sake, and for audience, the B&B is Burdens to Blessings, and that is a curriculum that we do in this ministry that
yes.
helps people reconcile with lots of hurts and pains and burdens, because God has always promised us. He's already promised us that if we bring those to Him, that He will do something with them. What was meant for evil or meant for harm, He can do something good with it. And He says, "Come to me, ye who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And there's so much in those scriptures that we talk about. And I can see, Cheryl, where your sense of wondering if God loved you was there. I can see in that sense of abandonment that you had all those questions. Do you think, I want to touch on this, do you think it's really not acceptable to be angry with God? In my mind, as you know, as a counselor, and of course you've got your PhD in it, so in a different kind of way. But to me, I've always felt like it's better to be angry and talk to Him than to not let Him know. He knows. Something about that honest communication, even when you're angry. How do you feel about that now that you've gotten through that?
Now I feel like it's okay. And I've told Him I was so angry at you know, and I feel it's okay now. Good. I didn't at the time as a child and growing up, and even in my adult years, I didn't believe, because I was taught that you can't do that. You can't be angry at God.
Right.
I was taught that was a no-no. But now I believe, you know, um, at
So,
least, and I'm so frustrated with you.
yeah, that's right. Well,
But
we hear all the time, don't question God, don't be angry. And I just think that that's fallacy. I think that God can handle, our questions. I think he can handle our anger. I think to me, those are building moments in our relationship. God wants a relationship with us. We don't have to come to him perfectly, right? We just come to
right,
him as we are. Matthew 11,
right,
12 says, come as you are. We
yes.
will show this on a larger screen, but the page 47 in your book shows the tennis courts of where you call your private place of escape. And when I read this book while I was on vacation last summer, and it's just never, so many parts of it just so rang true with me and my past. But the picture of that tennis court where there was a little dugout place there where you would lower yourself, just really tell me about that. Is that, why did you dig that place? What was in your mind then?
Um,
Were you trying to hide?
I was trying to hide from everybody. I
Yeah.
was trying to get away because if I got caught down there on the tennis courts, I would get in trouble and have to sift sand. Sift sand was a punishment that they gave us at the school there. And we used to have to sift sand for the people to make bricks to build the dorm or another house or whatever they needed to build. And we would sift the sand for them to make the bricks. So that was one of the punishments. So anyway, if I got caught, I would be punished, and because I wasn't supposed to be down there. So it was a place where I could sneak into the tennis courts without going down the road, and I would sneak down in there, kind of.
It's just looking at the picture, it makes me realize the ruggedness of the country, the poor state in which you have been left in. And it's just, and I know that our audience will grab this book and we'll show a picture of it, Africa in My Soul. Just an incredible story of your life and what you've walked through. And, as a child of a missionary, that the questions and, again, just the day-to-day surviving. How long did you end up being in that school?
8 years.
8 years. How
Oh
did you?
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Not in that school. In that school, I was there for let's see, 3 years, and then I went to the high school out there, about 30 miles away to the high school, and I was there for 2 years.
How often did you get to
So
see your parents?
we saw them for 2 weeks at Christmas, and then for about 10 weeks during the summer.
Mm-hmm. That was a long time without your parents. Cheryl, when you look back on this and when you tell the story and we read the book, what do you want to be the takeaway, the main point from this? What is your strong message through this?
Well, I guess two things. One thing is that to parents, as they make decisions, all decisions affect their children. And I guess the importance of decisions like this that are big decisions, the importance of recognizing how much the decisions will affect their children's lives. They have a great impact, more than you would think, on how much it affects the children's lives. They go far beyond what they think they will.
Yeah.
And number two, it was very difficult for me to write this book. And, but I'm glad I did. I just about didn't write it, but I'm glad I did, because the missionary kids who have written it, and some not missionary kids, just kids going through hard times, have written me back and said, I thought I was the only one that went through something like this. I'm so glad you wrote it, because I see I'm not the only one, and the book helped me. So I was grateful that I had written it because of that.
Yes.
So
I can so see why that would be the case, because even, and I've told you this, even reading it from the background from which I came, I felt just a special connection with you. I felt like, yeah, there are people out there who understand the issues that are not so comfortable to talk about, questioning God, anger with God, feeling alone and isolated, feeling abandoned, trying to survive as a child. And there's so many out there. And so for our readers, our listeners, I hope that you will buy this book and dive into it. It just has so much. But the final thought is, you're still standing. You came through it. You're Dr. Cheryl Duvall, and all things are possible, right? All things are possible.
all things are possible. Yeah,
Absolutely.
only believe. Only
Absolutely.
believe.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's, as I knew it would be, just a pleasure to have you. You were admired by so many, and I'm at the top of that list. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Friends, thank you so much for joining me for coffee. I told you, this lady, Dr. Cheryl Duvall, is one of the most amazing women I've ever met. She has gone through a lot, but now she is turning it around to benefit so many others. And that's what God calls us to do. He tells us in Genesis 50:20, that those things that come toward us or come at us or have happened in our life to hurt us, that once given to him, that he can turn that around and use it for our good and his glory, for the helping of others. So whatever has happened in your life, take hope from Dr. Duvall, and for many of those in the Bible, and for many of those around you. Ask God, how can he turn your situation around for others' good and to his glory? So thank you so much for joining me today. Listen, we've started a great conversation. Now take this and go out and continue the conversation with those around you. I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Coffee. Bye, everybody.